I never expected her arms to feel like home, but the moment she held me, I knew letting go was never going to be an option. The park was quieter than usual that evening. The late summer sun had begun its slow descent, painting the sky with those fading golds and soft oranges that make everything feel gentler, as if the day itself doesn't want to end. I sat down on a wooden bench, my sketchbook balanced on my knees, pretending to draw while really just letting my mind wander. It was then that I noticed her. Not in some dramatic way. No lightning strike, no instant soundtrack, but in the subtle, quiet way certain people command your attention without even trying. She was seated on another bench, just across the path, angled so the light fell over her shoulder. A book rested in her hands. She read without hurry, her posture composed, a soft confidence about her that spoke of someone entirely comfortable in her own skin. A breeze caught strands of her hair and brushed them across her cheek. She tucked them back absently, eyes still scanning the page. I should have looked away, gone back to my sketchbook, but something about the steadiness in her expression held me there. When she finally looked up, our eyes met. It lasted only a few seconds, but it felt longer than it should have. Her gaze wasn't piercing. It was warm, steady, like sunlight lingering through a window pane. And then, almost imperceptibly, her lips curved in the faintest smile before she looked back at her book. That should have been the end of it. Just a fleeting glance between two strangers sharing a quiet evening in the park. Yet I found myself caught in the afterglow of it. My heart beat a little quicker, my thoughts refusing to settle back into their ordinary rhythm. I tried to sketch the outline of the trees, the arc of the pathway, the fading light, but my hand betrayed me. Every line seemed to drift back toward the memory of her sitting there. The gentle way she held the book, the stillness in her posture. That smile. What struck me most wasn't beauty in the ordinary sense, though she was beautiful in a way that needed no exaggeration. It was something subtler, something that felt rare. She seemed grounded, present, as if she carried a whole world of stories inside her, yet chose, in that moment, to simply be. And for reasons I couldn't quite explain, that presence pulled me in. I thought about speaking, just a casual hello, maybe a comment about the weather, anything to bridge the small distance between us. But hesitation wrapped itself around me. She looked older, wiser somehow, and there was a gravity about her that made me wonder if approaching her would feel like intruding on a private sanctuary. So instead, I sat in silence, watching the sun sink lower, listening to the rustle of leaves, pretending to sketch while, in truth, my attention strayed again and again to her quiet figure across the path. It was nothing, just a glance, a smile, a presence. And yet, something inside me already knew this wasn't the kind of moment you forget easily. I didn't expect to see her again so soon. A few evenings later, I found myself back at the park, almost without meaning to. The air was cooler now, dusk creeping earlier into the sky, painting the clouds in muted purples. I sat in my usual spot, sketchbook balanced on my knees, though the pages stayed blank far longer than I cared to admit. And then, there she was. She walked slowly along the path, book in hand, pausing every so often to glance at the flowers edging the walkway. The same calm presence about her, the same quiet dignity. I tried to look busy, pencil scratching at the page, but when she reached the bench across from me, she caught my eye. That same warm smile flickered across her lips, and before I could overthink, I spoke. "Is that the same book as last time?" The words tumbled out before I had time to shape them, but to my relief, she paused and glanced at the cover in her hands. Then she laughed, soft, genuine. "It is," she said. "I tend to take my time with stories I don't want to end." Her voice carried with it something I hadn't expected. It was steady, low, with a kind of unhurried patience. The kind of voice that makes you lean closer, afraid to miss even a single note. I nodded, clutching my pencil a little tighter than necessary. "That sounds wise. I usually rush through books like I'm racing myself, but I always regret finishing too fast." She tilted her head, considering me. "And yet you sketch. That doesn't look like rushing." I glanced at the page, just a few faint outlines, nothing worth showing, but she was looking at me as if she meant it, as if my half-hearted scribbles held some kind of meaning. I'm not great at it, I admitted, but it helps me see things. Forces me to slow down, I guess. Her smile deepened, though it wasn't the kind that drew attention to itself. It was quiet, private, like something she gave only to me. A silence followed, but it wasn't uncomfortable. She sat down across from me, settling the book in her lap, her posture as graceful as before. I noticed the way her hands rested over the cover, relaxed but steady. Her fingers bore no rings, no sign of restless movement, just stillness, a kind of stillness that made me aware of every restless part of myself. We talk a little more about books, about the change of seasons, about the comfort of familiar routines. Nothing remarkable, and yet every word felt marked with significance, as if the act of sharing them had shifted something quietly between us. As the sky darkened, the first cool edge of night settling into the air, she finally rose. "Enjoy your drawing," she said, giving me one last smile. And just like that, she was gone again, leaving me with nothing but the sound of my heartbeat and the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the air. I told myself it was nothing, just a conversation, just words. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just stepped into the beginning of a story I hadn't expected to write. I hadn't planned on going to the cafe that afternoon. It was one of those days where the city felt too loud, where my thoughts pressed in on me, restless and unsettled. I ducked into the little cafe on the corner, the kind of place with creaking wooden floors and soft jazz humming low from a speaker in the corner. I thought I'd sit alone, sketch a little, maybe clear my head. But there she was, sitting by the window, light spilling across her shoulders as if it had chosen her alone. She was stirring a cup of coffee slowly, eyes half focused on something outside, lost in her own thoughts. For a moment, I stood frozen near the counter, debating whether to turn back, to leave before she noticed me. Then she looked up. Her eyes caught mine, and in that instant, the noise of the cafe seemed to fall away. A small smile rose to her lips, not surprised, not questioning, just inviting. She lifted her hand slightly, a subtle gesture toward the empty chair at her table. I hesitated, but my feet moved before my mind caught up. When I sat down, the warmth of the chair felt strange, as if it had been waiting for me. She leaned back slightly, resting her elbow on the table, and for the first time I noticed the delicate lines near her eyes, proof of a life lived fully and beautifully. "You found my favorite hiding place," she said, her voice carrying the easy humor of someone who had nothing to prove. "Then maybe it's fate," I replied before I could stop myself. Her laugh was quiet but full, the kind that made you want to say something just to hear it again. She sipped her coffee, watching me over the rim of the cup. And then, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, our conversation began. We spoke about little things, the music playing overhead, the way the cafe always smelled faintly of cinnamon, the weather shifting toward autumn. Simple things, but with her, they felt heavier somehow, weighted with unspoken meaning. At one point, as I made some self-deprecating comment about my messy sketchbook, she reached across the table and laid her hand lightly on my wrist. Just for a second, just long enough for her fingertips to rest against my skin, warm and certain. The touch was fleeting, but it set something humming through me, like the vibration of a string pulled too tight. I don't think she even realized the effect it had. She was already pulling her hand back, smiling as though it was nothing more than a passing gesture. But I felt it long after. Our knees brushed beneath the table once, then again. Neither of us moved away. The silence between words began to feel as alive as the words themselves. Every pause carried weight. Every glance lingered just a moment too long. When she finally closed her book and gathered her things, she looked at me with a softness I hadn't seen before. "I'll see you around," she said. Not a question, not a maybe, just a quiet certainty. And as I watched her walk away, I realized I already wanted more than just around. It started with a shift in the air. The sky darkened faster than usual that evening, and the scent of rain carried on the breeze long before the first drops fell. We'd been walking together, without much of a plan, just following the winding streets that led us away from the park. Conversation drifted easily, the kind that didn't need effort. Pauses felt natural, like silence itself was another language we both understood. And then the rain came. At first it was gentle, scattered drops tapping against the pavement. But within minutes, it thickened into a sudden downpour, soaking the street in silver streaks. We broke into a half-run, laughing despite ourselves, until we ducked beneath the narrow awning of a closed bookstore. The space was small, barely wide enough for the two of us to stand shoulder to shoulder. The awning dripped at the edges, the sound of rain filling the air like steady applause. I was close enough to feel the faint warmth radiating from her, close enough to notice the raindrops clinging to the ends of her hair. For a while, neither of us spoke. The rain gave us cover, a curtain of sound that made the world feel distant. She tilted her head back, eyes half closed, as if she were listening not just to the storm, but to something deeper inside herself. I don't know what pushed me to speak then. Maybe it was the closeness. Maybe it was the way the rain made everything feel raw, unguarded. I don't really fit with people my age, I admitted, my voice quieter than the rain, but enough for her to hear. I've tried, but I always feel out of step, like I'm looking for something that isn't there. She turned to me then, her expression softened by the glow of the street lamp across the road. For a moment, she didn't say anything. Then she exhaled slowly, the kind of sigh that carries more than words. I know that feeling, she said. Though for me, it's different. I've spent years hiding pieces of myself, parts one thought people wouldn't want to see. Too serious, too much, or not enough. It gets lonely being careful all the time. Her voice wavered slightly at the end, though she caught it quickly, her shoulders straightening as if to hide the vulnerability. But I'd already heard it, felt it. Without thinking, I shifted a little closer. Our shoulders brushed, and though the contact was small, neither of us pulled away. The fabric of her sleeve was damp against mine, but the warmth beneath it reached me all the same. The silence returned, but it was no longer empty. It was full of unspoken truths of the storm outside, of the quiet steadiness between us. I glanced down at her hand, resting loosely at her side, and almost reached for it. Almost. Instead, I let the moment breathe, knowing that sometimes the pause is more powerful than the action. The rain kept falling, but inside that narrow shelter, I felt something shift. A door opening, a weight lifting, and though neither of us said it aloud, I think we both knew something was beginning here, under the rain, that neither of us could ignore. By the time the rain slowed, the streets were slick with reflections of lamplight. She insisted I shouldn't walk home drenched, and before I could argue, I found myself following her up a quiet stairwell, the air carrying the faint scent of rain-soaked stone and blooming jasmine from a planter by her door. Her apartment was warm, inviting in a way that didn't feel staged. Bookshelves lined the walls, their spines mismatched and well-worn. A small lamp on the side table cast a golden glow that softened the room. There was music playing faintly, a record crackling with the imperfections that made it feel alive. "Here," she said gently, handing me a towel from the bathroom. "You'll catch a chill." I took it, but she didn't step back immediately. Instead, she stayed close, watching as I rubbed at my hair clumsily. A smile tugged at her lips. "You're making a mess of it." Before I could laugh it off, she reached up and took the towel herself. Her hands were steady, deliberate, as she pressed the soft fabric against my hair, drying it with a patience that left me still and quiet beneath her touch. I hadn't realized how rare it was, being cared for in such a simple, direct way. My breath caught slightly, and I lowered my gaze. Her face was only inches from mine, her expression calm but unreadable. The scent of rain lingered in her hair, mixed with something warmer, familiar, like vanilla and cedarwood. When she finally lowered the towel, she didn't step back. Instead, her hand slipped behind my neck, fingers resting lightly there, a gesture so natural it made me forget to breathe. "Thank you," I murmured, though I wasn't sure if I meant for the towel, the shelter, or simply her presence. Her eyes softened, searching mine, and then, without words, she drew me closer. Her arms circled my waist, firm but gentle, her cheek resting against my chest. At first, I stood frozen, startled by the quiet certainty of the gesture. But then I let myself sink into it, wrapping my arms around her in return. The world seemed to narrow to that one point of contact. The steadiness of her heartbeat, the warmth of her body against mine, the faint rise and fall of her breath. Time moved differently in that embrace. A few seconds, or maybe minutes, I couldn't tell. I only knew that the longer she held me, the more something inside me unraveled. The doubts, the hesitations, the restless noise of the outside world, all of it fell away. When she finally pulled back, it wasn't far. Just enough to look at me, her hands still resting lightly at my sides. There was something in her eyes then, something vulnerable, something she didn't hide. And I realized, in that fragile silence between us, that this wasn't just kindness. It wasn't just comfort. It was the beginning of something neither of us had expected, yet neither of us could deny.